Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Play On podcast. This is a football edition, and in this episode me and Luke are going to do our first ever All-Star Football Team for 2021. We finished the hurling All-Star Team, now we're moving on to the Gaelic Football edition. Luke, let's start with the goalkeepers. You know, it was a year really where the position of the goalkeeper was kind of highlighted how much the position has changed. The game that really jumps out at me is the Ulster final, where we had the kind of carnage of Niall Morgan and Rory Beggan kind of running all over the pitch. But there's no doubt now that the goalkeeper is one of the most important positions on the pitch. And, you know, which goalkeepers have stood out to you as being the star goalkeepers this summer?
Yeah, well, look, I think, first of all, if you just look at the final, kind of the two keepers have had fantastic years, both Morgan and Henley. And I think, look, they're probably the two obvious enough candidates straight away. And then, like, I suppose you look kind of elsewhere, I think the other two kind of we're considering would be Rory Beggan and Evan Comerford. Beggan kind of had a strange enough Ulster final, I suppose, when he kind of, there was not, like, he nearly played as an outfield player, kind of probably went too far, I think, with it a little bit. But, yeah, look, I would probably consider mostly between Morgan and Henley, but I think that just based off kind of his ability to kind of pick a pass, his ability to drive Tyrone forward, and just kind of that composure, I think it was epitomised by that kind of the long ball he played. He initially caught it on the 21-yard line, drove out of defence, long ball straight into McCurry. He should have probably buried it. So yeah, I would go Niall Morgan as the best keeper kind of in the country this year. And now that Stephen Cluxton's probably not playing inter-county anymore, I actually would consider him to be the best goalkeeper in the country by a bit of a margin now.
Yeah, I think that he had a fantastic year. I think it's between him and Rory Beggan, in my opinion, as the best goalkeeper in the country. I agree with you on everything about his importance to Tyrone. And let's not forget as well, his clutch points, the frees that he hit. You know, he hit that boomer in the semi-final against Kerry right before half-time. He hit Tyrone's first point in the All-Ireland final as well. The guy, he's a reliable player. He's very experienced. And now he has a much-deserved All-Ireland medal. So Niall Morgan is me and Luke's pick as the 2021 All-Star goalkeeper in football. So we'll move on to the full-back line. So the list that we have here of players for the full-back line, we have Paddy Hampsey, Pádraig O'Hora, Ronan McNamee, Mick O'Grady, Lee Keegan and Tom O'Sullivan. Which names kind of jump out to you as being the obvious ones here?
Look, I think the locks straight away are Paddy Hampsey and Lee Keegan. I think that the two of them are kind of the obvious enough choice in the full back line. I think both have been have had absolutely huge kind of years. And yeah, look, I think both could even kind of be in consideration for player of the year as well, based on like how good a year that they've had. So yeah, look, I think both were extremely important to their teams. Like Keegan kind of for driving Mayo on the whole time. He was nearly driving them on his own nearly at times for the final. And you saw how good he was against the Dubs as well. And he was really the leader of that team. And then as well, Hampsey, kind of how strong that Tyrone structure's been all year. So yeah, I think they're the two locks, if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said there. Hampsey, the point he kicked in the semi-final against Kerry, and then the point that he kicked in the final outside of the boot to make it 2 points each, absolutely superb. He's the Tyrone's captain. He's one of their leaders, and he's man-marked, you know, the most dangerous forwards in the country this year, and he's done a fantastic job on them. So, yeah, he's a lock for me in there. So is Lee Keegan. You mentioned about his performance against Dublin. He was fantastic that day. And even in the final, straight after Darren McCurry's goal, Lee Keegan hits an outside of the boot point to bring Mayo back to within 2. Then, you know, he gets fouled to bring them even closer. He constantly was stepping up, clutching up for Mayo, dragging them back into that game. It's an absolute travesty that this man doesn't have an All-Ireland, but in my mind, he has an All-Star this year, or he should. He's definitely on our team. And I'd like to put forward to you, I'd like to know your opinions on this. I think Pádraig O'Hora will be hard done by here. He was man of the match in the All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin. His, post-match speech, everyone really kind of, grew to like him after that speech. But for me, Ronan McNamee was absolutely outstanding all throughout this year. He did a fantastic job on Aidan O'Shea in the All-Ireland final as well. He's a great fullback for Tyrone. He's my pick, to be honest, as number one choice to fill out this full-back line.
Yeah, look, I'd completely agree with that. I think going into the final, everybody kind of had O'Hora kind of as their kind of third man in that full-back line. But look, I think he had a tough old time in that final. And yeah, I think he really struggled in the final, really. And ultimately, I suppose, if you're looking at the year that the Tyrone fullback line have had, I think it's impossible to kind of pick anyone other than, I suppose, McNamee or Michael McKernan. So, and then based off that as well, I would say that McNamee kind of has been playing as at a level which makes him by far the best fullback in the country. He has been for a while. And like even prior to Tyrone kind of like the season that they've had this year, I think McNamee's been performing at a consistent level at fullback. And yeah, look, I think I would completely agree that I'd have him as the fullback in this team.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to go with that. So that's our full back line. We'll move into the half back line now. So the names that we've left to potentially complete out the half back line. Now, this is not, strict on what positions they can play. So there's a few names in here that would have played in the full back line, but we know that they can play in the half back line as well. The names for the half back line All-Stars are Paddy Durkin from Mayo, Brino Biogli from Kerry, Peter Hart from Tyrone, Michael McKernan from Tyrone, Brian Howard from Dublin, Ryan McInnesby from Monaghan, and Kieran McGeary from Tyrone. And I'd like to put forward to you, I think there are two locks in this team. They're both Tyrone men, Peter Hart and Kieran McGeary. They're absolutely exceptional. What did you make of their years?
Yeah, look, I don't think anyone could argue against either of them being in the team. I think the two of them absolutely have to be there. And look, I think again, like I've said this already with the fullback, but there's a great chance that the two of them will be nominated for Footballer of the Year as well. So, yeah, look, I've no arguments whatsoever between the two of them. And look, we'll probably get into talking about the two of them more when we get to the Footballer of the Year discussion.
100%. So Peter Hart is in at centre half back. Kieran McGeary is in at left half back. We have to talk about the clutch moments that Peter Hart and Kieran McGeary had this year. Peter Hart in the All-Ireland semi-final, that block down on Killian Spillane as he was going through on goal. Then in the final itself, that catch right near the end to get another point on the board for Tyrone. He clutched up over and over and over again. Kieran McGeary, on the other hand, I think the standout moment for him was that point that he hit in the final in the first half where he put it up right up into the clouds and it went over the bar. Fantastic score from him. He's just a really, really mobile footballer. He's the type, I'd see him very similar to, not Scully in the sense, but that if you look at the game, you won't really see just how valuable Kieran McGeary is to Tyrone. But if you actually watch what he does, he's a vital part of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose then as well, for me, with the final position in this line, I think this is probably the easiest line to field to pick. I think it has to be Paddy Durkin as well. I think if with the list kind of that you've mentioned there, and you kind of consider performances this year, I think he's probably a level above every other kind of remaining candidate we have there. So yeah, I think that's a fairly easy enough choice as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to go with Durkin. I think, he kicked some fantastic points throughout the year, and then he made that block in the dying moments of the All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin. He stopped that goal-bound shot from Cormac Costello. The guy is a fantastic defender. I do feel harsh to leave out Michael McKernan. I think he was brilliant this year, but I'm happy to go with that defence. So Paddy Hampsey, Ronan McNamee, Lee Keegan, Paddy Durkin, Peter Hart and Kieran McGeary is our defence. Moving into the midfield, we picked 5 names here as our nominations for the midfield pairing. Which are the first? So those 5 names are Brian Fenton from Dublin, Matthew Ruan from Mayo, Con Kilpatrick from Tyrone, Brian Kennedy from Tyrone, and Killian Lavelle from Monaghan. So which one of them names kind of jumps out to you as being the obvious first one in the team?
Look, I think the obvious one, I suppose, will be Con Kilpatrick. I think, I do think that the midfield, again, like we've kind of talked about, kind of that certain positions kind of picking themselves. And I do think that the midfield picks itself as well. I think it's Kilpatrick and Ruan. I think that the standard of midfield kind of play this year has been probably not at its highest ever, but I think that those two have been kind of dominant. Ruan maybe didn't have a great final, but I think you can't ignore kind of his level of performance prior to the final as well all year. So, yeah, look, I that's what I would be going with. I think Kilpatrick's kind of come from nowhere, really, where he wasn't even a starter. And look at some of his fielding throughout the year as well. So I think, yeah, I would go with that. Maybe with Brian Kennedy probably being the unlucky one to miss out.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said there. The key thing that you mentioned about Con Kilpatrick's fielding, he set up that chance for Tyrone's second goal, which came from Darren McCurry. His catch there was absolutely remarkable. Matthew Rowan as well dragged Mayo, and during stages of the game against Dublin when they were really flat, he kicked Mayo's first point, which they vitally needed. He dragged them through at stages where they were really lacklustre, and I think he shouldn't be forgotten about that because of the result of the final. So that's our midfield pairing. Con Kilpatrick of Tyrone is our number 8, and Matthew Rowan of Mayo is our number 9. So now that we've that finished, let's move into the forwards. Who's the first lock really in the forwards for you?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose in the half-forward line, I think probably the one that stands out straight away will be Conor Myler. I think the kind of the pockets of space that he picks up, and kind of he's nearly the link between the Tyrone back line and the forward line. And you see how vital that was this year with the speed of their build-up and everything as well. And with the space of the pockets that Myler picks up, I think he's absolutely vital for that Tyrone team. And yeah, I think he has to be the first name in the half-forward line.
Couldn't agree more. I think Myler's role in this Tyrone team is absolutely vital. And so I'm happy to have him in as the first lock in the team. The other names then for the 5 positions, we have gone with Kieran Kilkenny from Dublin, Matthew Tierney from Galway, Dermot O'Connor from Mayo, Sean O'Shea from Kerry, Niall Sludden from Tyrone, Paddy Clifford from Kerry, Daniel Flynn from Kildare, Paddy McBurty from Donegal, Darren McCurry from Tyrone, Ryan O'Donoghue from Mayo, Cathal McShane from Tyrone, Jack McCarron from Monaghan, David Clifford from Kerry, Maddie Donnelly from Tyrone, and Tommy Conroy from Mayo. So out of all them names on the list that I've just said for the remaining 5 positions, which one do you think goes in first?
Yeah, look, I suppose if we're kind of looking at the half forward line, I suppose first, then I would like what I've kind of was thinking for the half forward line would be Paddy Clifford in centre half forward. I know that it was probably a disappointing enough end for the year for Kerry, but I think he was consistently excellent for Kerry all year. And yeah, I would have him as the centre half forward in the team. And then that would leave for me kind of a debate, I suppose, between Sludden, Sean O'Shea and Kieran Kilkenny for the last spot, left half forward. And I would go with Kilkenny there.
Completely agree with you as well. I think that Sludden had a fantastic year. He had a fantastic All-Ireland final. He kicked 2 fantastic points in the first half, one outside the boot, one when he cut inside, and then he obviously stopped Conor Loftus's shot on the goal line. But I think Kilkenny was Dublin's kind of shining light throughout the championship, and I think out of the whole championship, really, I think he was the only Dublin player who never let his level drop throughout any game that he played. And even in the first half against Mayo, he was outstanding up until O'Hara got put on him anyway. And yeah, I think he's a worthy recipient of the All-Star Award in a year that was a bit bleak for Dublin.
Yeah, look, I just think that Kilkenny is completely dominant kind of at this stage now playing for Dublin. And yeah, look, you look at his contributions throughout all of Leinster, and in the period kind of when Dublin were completely faltering, kind of look at the tallies, he was putting up 5 or 6 points every single game from play. And look, he's just kind of exceptional, playing at an exceptional level. And I think he probably has to go in there and left half forward.
Agreed. So for the full forward line, I'd like to put forward my first nomination. I think this guy has to go in, Darren McCurry from Tyrone.
Yeah, look, completely agreed. And yeah, again, somebody that might well end up with a Footballer of the Year nomination. And yeah, look, kind of his ability to kind of hit freakish scores from every sort of angle, I think he has to be the first name in the full forward line. And as well, I probably would propose David Clifford as the other kind of member of the full forward line that probably has to be there.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. The next name I'd like to throw forward for the nomination, I think, has to be Ryan O'Donoghue. I know he missed the penalty in the final, but he had a fantastic game, particularly in the semi-final against Dublin. He was outstanding throughout the entire game. He clawed Mayo back into that game when they were really close to being completely wiped out. And even in the final, up until the penalty miss, he was outstanding.
Yep, look, I'd completely agree with that. There's a few other kind of candidates as well that have to probably be considered. I think Maddie Donnelly is very close to kind of getting in there as well. Tommy Conroy is really good there as well. I think any of them 3 could be the final member of that. But I know that you probably think that O'Donoghue is probably the strongest, and I would be happy to kind of concede him as the final member of that full forward line.
Yep, I'm happy to have O'Donoghue in. I think he had a fantastic year, and for such a young player, he's really clutched up for Mayo. So that is our All-Star football team for 2021. Now we have to pick the manager. And I think the manager, as with the team, the management team picks itself. I think it has to be Brian Dooher and Feargal Logan, right?
Yeah, look, I think I'd completely agree with that. I think Dooher and Logan, that the job they've done kind of the first year after taking over since Mickey Hart, I think it has to be them as the obvious choice for management team in the year, I suppose.
100%. So that's the Play on GAA football team of the year for 2021. We've got Feargal Logan and Brian Dooher from Tyrone in charge. So the team is Niall Morgan from Tyrone in goal. Fullback line, Paddy Hampsey and Ronan McNamee from Tyrone and Lee Keegan from Mayo. Halfback line is Paddy Durkin from Mayo, and then Peter Hart and Kieran McGeary from Tyrone. Midfield is Con Kilpatrick from Tyrone and Matthew Ruran from Mayo. Half forward line is Conor Myler from Tyrone, Kieran Kilkenny from Dublin and Paddy Clifford from Kerry. And full forward line then is Darren McCurry from Tyrone, Ryan O'Donoghue from Mayo and David Clifford from Kerry. So Luke, now that we've the team done, Footballer of the Year time, who stood out to you as the key man in 2021?
Yeah, look, I think, well, the thing is that based off the year, kind of that there were so many exceptional kind of candidates from Tyrone that they played as such a strong kind of collective. It's very hard to narrow it down into into a kind of smaller kind of group of players. I suppose from Tyrone, I think if it had to be pushed on it, I would say that the most impressive were probably Conor Myler, Peter Hart and Kieran McGeary, maybe with Niall Morgan being an honourable mention.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said there. For me, it's between either Peter Hart or Ryan O'Donoghue. And I think Ryan O'Donoghue was like the key man that kind of carried Mayo. And Peter Hart was massive for Tyrone. Who would it really come down to if you had to go for one or even two? Who would it come down towards?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose just to kind of give a brief mention, I suppose, to Lee Keegan as well. I think he has to be kind of in the running for Player of the Year as well. But I think for me, it's either between Conor Myler or Peter Hart, and I'd probably be leaning towards Peter Hart for his consistency throughout the year, especially in the two biggest games during the year.
Yeah, like the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking that McGeary has to come really close. Conor Myler was fantastic as well, but the one thing that I'm seeing as consistent throughout this is that we both seem to be putting Peter Hart right up there. So I think that kind of decides it then is...
I think that I would probably go with Peter Hart just for consistency throughout, kind of, and I think it's very hard to look past him. I think he's just playing at an exceptional level this year.
I agree with that. So Peter Hart, congratulations, you're the Play on GAA Footballer of the Year for 2021. Now, Luke, while we're on topics of Footballers of the Year, I'd like to put forward my candidate for Young Footballer of the Year. If you have any objections to it, let me know. My candidate is Tommy Conroy from Mayo.
Yeah, look, I think that's kind of the obvious enough candidate, and I can't really see anyone else kind of being up there, really, I suppose. So yeah, I think Tommy Conroy has to be kind of that candidate there as well.
Would Matthew Tierney at all come into the picture, or did he? I think he played too few a championship, too small a championship to really be considered. But he was fantastic against Roscommon, and he had a good Connacht Championship final as well.
Yeah, look, he did, and look, I suppose he warrants a mention, but I think, yeah, when you kind of look at the nature of the games that Mayo have played, how much further they got into it, the higher stakes games as well, and that Conroy played in, I think it has to be Conroy.
Agreed, and I'd like to throw Dara Canavan's name in there as well. He's another young lad, and I think you can't really give Young Footballer of the Year to a player that didn't really start any games. I think he came back in too late. He had too few minutes, but when he was on the pitch, he was outstanding. But that's our Footballers of the Year. So our Footballer of the Year is Peter Hart, and our Young Footballer of the Year then is Tommy Conroy from Mayo. Congratulations, Tommy. And that's our All-Stars for football for 2021. Luke, thanks for doing this with me.
Yep, no worries. Thanks, James.
All right, guys, that's this episode of the Play On podcast over and done with. We hope you enjoyed, and take care.